I am Elder Small, and I'd like to thank you for joining me today, wherein we will spend some time reviewing the third chapter of my book, You Deserve More. It's an excellent book. If you haven't picked up a copy, you can do so at eldersmall.com. The title of chapter 3 is Reality or the Program. Chapter 3 sets out to illuminate our perception and understanding of reality, in part by juxtaposing our day-to-day perception of reality with spiritual, historical, cultural, and traditional aspects of reality that predate Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The main focus of Chapter 3 is the delineation of information relating to what we know about our souls, the soul being synonymous with spirit, consciousness, and primordial energy. Many of us grew up in households and communities where political, educational, and religious programming facilitated our sense of reality. Our understanding of reality was based on blind acceptance of what we were taught at home, in our communities, churches, and in school. Life and death were summed up by two Bible verses, the first being Ecclesiastes 12:7, which says, "The dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it." The second verse is 1 Corinthians 5:8, which says, "We are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord." When people died, these verses were read to pacify and comfort families and communities. That's it. The spirit returned to God off planet, sleeping somewhere until the second coming of Jesus. This explanation left people knowing nothing about the state of the dead and offered no proof that they would ever be seen or heard from again. The teachings of the church arguably culminated in the cessation of life, which served to camouflage the existence of the immortal, eternal soul, to subdue, repress, and suppress uneasiness. The church rationalized the fact that God left people hanging all the time. We prayed, and prayed, yet people were sick and couldn't get well. Vices seemed to control the lives of families and communities. Church leaders were known to indulge the vices, which included greed, drugs, and lust. Communities overrun with drugs, gangs, prostitution, racism, violence, and murder were sure to have multiple churches on every street, taking as much money out of the community as the other vices. Rather than provide remedies, the Bible thumpers pacified people, estranged people from one another, and facilitated the ideology of divide and conquer. If there is a land where people live in bondage to erroneous ideologies of dying and death, it is the land the world knows as America. I am an African American, and for a long time I've lived not knowing anything other than what I was taught by communal, political, educational, and religious institutions. America was the stronghold that maintained a program designed and ran by people dedicated to keeping people in the dark about life outside America. American institutions were portrayed as all-powerful, which was facilitated by laws that were subjectively enforced. One of the reasons their program has been so successful is the unrelenting dissemination of disinformation. Disinformation and downright lies are the instruments they use to camouflage their power and greed. Those in control of the false reality program do everything they can to prevent people from knowing the history of life and civilizations that have existed on Earth for thousands, if not millions of years. The foundation of the false reality program insists that people be kept in the dark about human origins, the history of life on Earth, the afterlife, and the oneness and unity of the universe. The soul, which is the essence of reality, was effectively paralyzed and drugged with a prescription of religion, politics, miseducation, individualism, materialism, consumerism, pleasure, and lustful images. And so chapter 3 broadens, it seeks to broaden perception, and it delineates information related to life before, during, and after the soul incarnates in our physical bodies. There is ageless evidence that the soul continues its evolution once the body dissipates by returning to the celestial realm in preparation for reincarnation. This is tough to wrap our heads around because our reality program is invested in what the Bible says, and according to the Bible, anything that doesn't line up with biblical doctrine is contrived by people who are controlled by the kingdom of Satan. However, despite being snared by the reality program and the passage of time, the theological, philosophical, mythological, spiritual, and oral traditions of our ancestors are preserved in their authentic form. Our ancestral resources, they abound with energy. That is, the energy it takes to renounce the false reality program and light out on a pathway to remember, rediscover, and embrace who we are. Kemet, Sumeria, India, Asia, Mesoamerica, these are just a few of the geographical locations with preserved records that have been preserved for thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years. The records contain information concerning the origins of life, death, and the afterlife. What the reality program calls doctrines of Satan are records as ancient as the mountains and oceans, records that give rise to questions that are looked upon with disdain. And though looked upon with disdain by those snared by the reality program, our ancient records contain source material that the Israelites or Hebrews used to write the Old Testament, and many of those same records were used by the Romans to write the New Testament. This is why much of what the Bible says melts into obscure rambling when studied alongside the records of ancient civilizations. There was a young philosopher. His name was Younger Sinisa. He was born in year 4 of our era. He wrote an essay entitled "On Tranquility of the Mind." He says that Caesar was responsible for a fire wherein 40,000 manuscripts were burned in Alexandria. It was Rome who introduced an era of intellectual cleansing, an era where Rome set about creating a belief system, the reality program that survives up until today. The rise of the Roman Empire and the Catholic Church spells a period in history where military strategy and strength, along with the crowning of Christianity as an autocracy, concentrated power into the hands of a small number of aristocrats who carefully engineered the first religion designed to conquer the world, which set in motion a precedent for other religions to engage and follow suit. And so, After 2,000 years of the Christian empire or reality program, the ancient sciences have emerged to tell us it's time to break the shackles and go free with the work of people like Brian Foster, Graham Hancock, D.S. Allen, and Dallaire, as well as teams of world-class archaeologists, geologists, engineers of all types, chemists, physicists, and other professionals. We have evidence that highly evolved humans have lived on Earth for thousands, possibly millions of years. In 1822, Francis Jean Champollion deciphered the Rosetta Stone, that is, hieroglyphics. This allowed us to translate and gather information from one of our earliest known civilizations. It unlocked a treasure chest of spiritual and philosophical information. And so chapter 3 opens a dialogue with the writers, professionals, and ancient records just mentioned to disseminate information critical for this generation's liberation. Less than 3 or 4 centuries ago, people sharing this information were subject to charges of heresy and being sentenced to death, which goes to say that the truth, like life, cannot be destroyed. And so that is, as we conclude, we're just going to say, Dua, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I say, we are one. We all are derived from the same source, and with that, we part ways. In doing so, we say dua. I say, we wish you nothing but the greatest good, and that you might aspire to intellectual greatness. Thank you for joining us. I say dua.